We're back on Yaffee Live. You know what this show is by now. The whole town knows what this show is by now. You should know how to spell it by now.
So Yaffee, except when you're typing on a 29-cent computer keyboard, and sometimes you leave out one of the F's.
All right, yes, Yaffee Live. You know who I am, Tennessee's voice of reason. You know how this show works, your voice of truth. The main voice of truth here in Chattanooga, I think. One thing, we have a lot to get to on the show right now. One thing we do have to talk about, story at the Tennessee Conservative, says Tennessee schools to begin implementing gun safety lessons in their curriculum. So let's talk about that right now. Olivia Lupia is a reporter with the Tennessee Conservative, and of course, you can read all her stuff at TennesseeConservativeNews.com. Olivia, how are you today?
Doing great. How are you doing?
Doing good, doing good. So what about this story? Why do Tennessee schools want to begin implementing gun safety lessons in their curriculums?
Well, I think the why is unfortunately becoming more and more obvious. I'm sad to say, as we continue to see these mass shootings and these armed people coming into schools and wreaking all sorts of havoc. So the bill, it actually doesn't really change anything. It just expands. It's called the SAVE Act, which already teaches preparation for like emergencies, severe weather incidents, intruders in the school, things like that. So what they're going to be doing is adding a firearm safety component to that. So it's going to teach kids about, proper firearm storage, what to do if they find a gun on school grounds, the importance of reporting to an adult, that kind of a thing. So they'll take this course once a year and it'll be age appropriate, of course. Obviously, you're not going to teach a kindergartner the same things you're going to teach maybe a high schooler. But the idea is to mostly be prepared for if they see a gun in a school or they encounter an unattended firearm, just to give them some knowledge, because again, we should be teaching our kids that the gun is the tool. It's the people that commit the crimes. It's not the tool itself. So if we're not afraid of the tool, we know how to properly deal with it. That's hopefully going to give kids a better base of knowledge and understanding and not reacting from a place of fear, but rather from a place of competency.
Yeah, and some people on the left, I'm sure, will scream about this. But, all I have to do is talk to my mom or even talk to Max where, back in the day there were guns around and they were just taught, you just knew, you don't mess with the guns. And I have a lot of people tell me, they would have guns in their car because they would go hunting after school. So what that tells me is that the problem isn't the gun, because guns are not new to America. The availability of guns, it's not a new thing to this country. What's new is this sort of mental illness that seems to be spreading. Exactly.
And that's the thing is, once again, like you said, the guns aren't new. It's not the guns causing the problem. And actually, this bill picked up quite a bit of Democrat support, which was very encouraging because it was just about teaching safety. And some of the Democrats even said, hey, I wish the parents could attend these trainings, because it's not the tool, It's how you use it. So I think that's actually pretty cool. Of course, some Democrats were upset because you can't opt your kid out of it. And what if kids are traumatized and blah, blah, blah. The training doesn't even include live firearms or ammunition. So if looking at a slide of a gun is too much for you, then you have bigger problems than the public school system is equipped to handle.
Yeah, that's a good point. I wish this was something that I was taught as a kid. I mean, growing up, I wasn't taught any of this stuff. And I kind of wish, looking back, that I was, because I think it's necessary. Speaking with Olivia Lupia, she is with the Tennessee Conservative. On this same note, we just talked about the sad epidemic of too many school shootings, and it looks like some East Tennessee faith-based private schools are going to increase their security measures because of this.
Yes, and that's a trend we're seeing across the state, not just East Tennessee, but a lot of schools now. So because these private schools don't receive the same funding as the public schools as far as for the security resource officers or school officers, things like that, they're having to find ways to accomplish that themselves. So some of them are hiring a private security firm, which provides armed security outside the building. They're reaffirming that they've got cameras and things all over the place. Some schools are even employing, they call it like a school guardian program, which is using family members. So family members who have concealed carry permits are actually coming to patrol the school grounds.
Yeah, I mean, fortunately, there's only so much you can do with security, but it makes sense that some schools would want to do this. And also, this kind of makes sense. Another story you guys have is that mass shooters will now be required to be tested for antidepressants and gender-altering drugs in Tennessee. So if they're caught, or I guess you can test them even if they've killed themselves after the fact, to see if they had any type of drugs in their system, right?
Yes. So the idea is to see if there's any kind of psychotropic or gender-altering drugs that might be facilitating these acts of terrorism. I mean, let's call them what it is. So it's going to mandate that county coroners, when they perform the autopsy, take blood samples and look at these specific drugs, and then provide a report to the General Assembly to see if there is a link. So it's a good thing because I think the study is going to show more than, it won't be surprising, let's put it that way, but it will give the General Assembly some hard data to potentially enact different laws down the line. So that's a good thing.
Okay, yeah, that's really good. I mean, the idea really is kind of what you said, just to get some data on this, because every time one of these things happens, there's a lot of speculation about if they had drugs in their system or whatever it is, but there really isn't any hard data on that. So it'd be good to have some hard data. I'm guessing there'll probably be some pushback because it has to do with gender-altering drugs as well. And, of course, the transgender issue came up because this is another one that identified as transgender.
Yes, exactly. And we're really seeing that there are already studies being done that show that antidepressants are linking to all sorts of other mental disorders and those kinds of things. So, like I said, I don't know that the results will be too shocking. I think it's tragic nonetheless, but they won't be too shocking. But hopefully we'll get some concrete data which good legislators can use to build precedent. And then you've got the data, so when those Democrats or those lefties push back and say, well, you can't prove it, well, here you go, here are the numbers. So I don't think it's definitely never a bad thing to look at those. I just think it's going to take a little bit of time to build that data so we have something concrete to work from.
Speaking with Olivia Lupia, she is with the Tennessee Conservative. And you're right, there was definitely a theme with a lot of these stories today, and this one is a part of that theme. A new low story you have on your site. Conservatives decry state's appeal of ruling that restored Second Amendment constitutionality. It says, though a 3-judge panel issued a ruling declaring Tennessee's intent to go armed provision unconstitutional, the state will be proceeding with an appeal, causing dismay amongst some conservatives who believe Republican leadership is undermining their responsibility to protect and preserve their constitutional rights. So talk about this a little bit more.
Yes, so this is really telling, I think, about the state of our state, in essence. The fact that it took a private lawsuit from, it was several members of the Tennessee Firearms Association and Gun Owners of America, and the organizations didn't sue, but it was members who did, that they had to sue the state to even get this to be an issue because we've got these statutes in Tennessee law that say, basically, in essence, it is a crime to carry a gun with the intent of carrying a gun. So it, in essence, completely strips what is the heart of the Second Amendment, which is to say you have the right to keep and bear arms. So the Chancery Court ruled in favor of the plaintiffs who said, hey, this stuff is not constitutional. It doesn't line up with the Second Amendment. And the state is now appealing that to hold on and say, well, basically, Tennessee Attorney General Jonathan Skrmetti said, well, we think the ruling is too broad. You have to have laws in place. It is constitutional to say that a 10-year-old can't, bring a gun to a basketball game, or a drunk person can't walk down the street with a shotgun. Well, I don't, using the word constitutional is a little bit iffy there to me because we have laws that say those things, but the Constitution and the Second Amendment itself is very clear. Shall not be infringed is not really, there's no room for interpretation. So there were several state lawmakers, conservative Republican state lawmakers, who signed a letter, which was written by Representative Monty Fritz, who has been amazing on stopping red flag laws and really been pushing to restore the sovereignty of citizens. But 11 other Republicans signed on to this letter to really say, hey, please do not appeal this. Please reconsider. You're really undermining the basic freedoms we have. And that this is very telling that our own government, which again is, supposedly Republican, we're a conservative leader in the nation, so-called, constitutional carry. Everyone likes to throw that word around. You can't have constitutional carry when you've got a law that literally says if you intend to be armed, you are committing a crime, even in your own home. So this is a very interesting development. I think it's awesome that we got the first Chancery Court ruling, and then we'll see how the appeals shake out. But there is concern that it might be overturned just on some technicalities that don't even address the constitutional challenge. So very interesting and very telling about the inner workings of our state leadership here.
Well, and, I'll have to get the Attorney General on the show sometime in the future to talk about it because he's usually pretty conservative. And I guess he has some disagreements with some conservatives on this. So it'd be good to hear him expand on that and get his overall reasoning. Olivia Lupia, go ahead.
No, I was going to agree with you. I'm surprised kind of by this because Scarmetti has had a very good track record on most things, especially leading the fight with the transgender at the Supreme Court and protecting our kids and a lot of things. So this is interesting, and I just don't know what more is going on behind the scenes, but hopefully that will continue to come out as information comes out about the suit and the appeal.
Olivia Lupia is with the Tennessee Conservative. Any other stories you're working on today that we need to look for?
Well, the only other thing interesting that people may be as equally unhappy about as I is they've completed some solar farm work in Blount County. So that's one of 3 solar farms completed, which, there's just so much about renewable energy we could go into. That's a whole different discussion.
Yeah.
But mostly the big concern is that Tennessee is losing farmland at an unprecedented rate. So we're spending hundreds of billions of taxpayer dollars to go towards these projects to install solar panels, which a lot of them, the energies that they're supposed to be replacing, whatever they're shutting down, whether it's another plant or a different energy source, won't even meet the same energy production as the plant or the replacement that they're shutting down. So you've got taxpayer dollars being poured into these projects that are taking years to complete, that aren't going to come up to even meet the same quota of energy that their predecessors were, and we're losing farmland. So that's just something I think that people aren't realizing, how much the green is sneaking into Tennessee. So hopefully we will see some action on that, and maybe this session some of the conservative fighters will pick back up on fighting against that.
Yeah, I've said for a while, I don't have anything against solar power itself, but it can never be a replacement for what we have now. DeSantis put it well in Florida. He said stuff like that can be a supplement to have a little bit extra, but the idea of it being a replacement and then, like you said, tearing down what could be farmland is, I think, a big problem, and not necessarily good for the environment either in the long term.
Right.
So very interesting. Olivia Lupia is with the Tennessee Conservative. Read her stories and more, TennesseeConservativeNews.com. Olivia, I appreciate it. We'll talk to you again next week.
Sounds good. Thank you so much.
Thank you as well. So.